So like normally it's already ready. I'm already in the frame, but I just wanted to show because this looked kind of cool to me. Yes, I broke the magic. We're not actually in a Victorian style library. I'm sorry, that's not my typewriter. I borrowed it from Jane Austen. What are you gonna do? We're gonna be reading more Cress, and I wanted to not show off the setup process, but just feel like, this is what it takes. You gotta get everything all pretty and ready, and so on and so forth. And no tea because I forgot to brew some, but rest assured I will have some later. Aha. Haha. Delicious. Cress. Book 3. I had a PB&J sandwich right before this. That was a mistake. The cat has caught the bird, and she will scratch your eye. The cat has caught the bird, and she will scratch out your eyes as well. You will never see your Rapunzel again. Chapter 31. The girl returned from her trip to the bar, setting a drink against Thorne's wrist so he would know where it was. He tilted his head towards her and lifted the cards. What do you think? Her braids brushed his shoulder. I think... She tugged at 2 cards in his hand. These 2. Precisely the 2 I was thinking, he said, taking hold of the 2 cards. Our luck is changing right about now. 2 to the blind man, said the dealer, and Thorne heard the cards slapping down on the table. He slid them up into his hands. The woman clicked her tongue. That's not what we wanted, she said, and she could hear the pout in her voice. Ah, well, said Thorne. We can't win them all, or apparently any of them. He waited until the bidding came around before folding. The woman leaned closer from behind him and nuzzled his neck. The next hand will be yours. Thorne grinned. I am feeling lucky. He listened as the bidding went twice around the table, and the winner claimed the pot with gestures and 7s. From the man's gruff voice, Thorne pictured a scraggly beard and an excessive belly. He'd drawn up mental images of all the players at the table. The dealer was a tall and skinny man with a fine mustache. The lady beside him was elderly, and something kept jangling when she took her cards, so Thorne pictured an abundance of gaudy jewelry. He judged the man to his right to be scrawny but with bad skin, but that was probably because he was winning the most. Of course, the woman who had draped herself over Thorne was viciously hot, and not at all lucky, it turned out. The dealer dealt out another hand, and Thorne raised his cards. Beside him, the girl let out a sad whistle. So sorry, love, she whispered. So sorry, love. He pouted. No hope? What a shame. The bidding opened, moving around the table. Check, bet, raise. Thorne tapped his fingers against his cards and sighed. They were useless, judging from the woman's sad inflection. Naturally, he put his palm against his chips and slid the entire stack toward the center of the table, listening to the happy clatter of chips falling against one another. Not that he had a lot of them. All in, he said. The woman behind him was silent. The hand on his shoulder didn't even twitch. Nothing to acknowledge that he'd gone against her suggestion. Poker face, indeed. You're a fool, said the scrawny player, but he folded. The bearded man snorted with a sound that made Thorne's spine tingle, not from concern, but expectation. This was his man. I'd raise if I thought you had anything left to bet, he said, following by the clicking and clacking of chips. The 2 players folded. The dealer passed out cards to replace the throwaways, 2 to Thorne's opponent. He kept all his cards. If his lady disapproved, her statuesque hands hinted at nothing. They didn't bother to bid for the second round, knowing that Thorne was maxed out. Thorne fanned his cards out on the table. The dealer called them out, his finger thumping against his opponent's hands. Doubles! Then, Royal Triplets win! Thorne arched an eyebrow as the old lady with the jewelry let out a delighted giggle. To the blind man! I trust the Royal Triplets were mine? Indeed! Nice hand! Said the dealer, pushing the chips in Thorne's directions. He heard a chair crash to the ground. You outdated piece of junk! You should have told him to fold that hand! I did, said the girl behind Thorne in an even tone that failed to acknowledge the insult. He chose to ignore my recommendation. Thorne tipped back in his chair. It's your own fault for teaching her the game so well. If I'd won even a couple hands, I wouldn't have been suspicious, but even my luck isn't this bad. He twirled his fingers through the air, enjoying the explanation. I just had to wait here until there was a hand she claimed wasn't salvageable, and then I knew I'd have a winner. Beaming, he leaned forward and scooped the chips toward him, enjoying the way they filled up his arms. He heard a couple drop to the floor, but left them, unable to suffer the indignity of rummaging around with his fingers. But, he said, beginning to stack up his earnings chip by chip, having no idea what color or value any of them were. I'm willing to make you a deal if you aren't too sore, loser. What deal? That was almost everything I had! Your own fault, of course, for cheating. The man gargled something incoherent. Arr! But I'm nothing if not a businessman. I'd like to buy your escort droid from... Holy shit. He's buying the escort droid for Aiko! Ah! But I'm nothing if not a businessman. I'd like to buy your escort droid from you. He waved his fingers over the stacks of chips. Would you say she's worth about... this much? The man spluttered. You can't even see her! Smirking, Thorne reached up and patted the hand that still rested on his shoulder. She's very believable, he said. But I'm a man of keen observation and, what can I say? She seems to be missing a pulse. He gestured at the chips again. Fair trade? He heard the screech of chair legs on tiles and the clomping of man's boots as he rounded the table. Uh-oh. Thorne grabbed his cane from where he propped it against the table, just as he was pulled out of his seat by his shirt collar. Now, let's be gentlemen. A crunching pain rattled through his skull, snapping his head back. He fell onto the floor, his cheekbone throbbing and the taste of iron on his tongue. Testing that his jaw worked, he pressed a hand against his face, knowing that the punch would leave one heck of a mark. That, he muttered through his milled thoughts, was not politically correct. Yeah, assaulting a blind man. The man roared, followed by more chairs screeching and furniture falling and something like dishes shattering and people yelling, and then there was a mess of limbs crawling and tumbling as a full-scale brawl broke out into the bar. Thorne curled up on himself, holding his cane above his head as a pathetic shield against the chaos, trying to make himself as small a target as he could. A wayward knee connected with his hip. A falling chair battered his forearms. Two hands snaked beneath his armpits, hauling him backward. Thorne kicked at the floor, allowing himself to be pulled off the cluster of elbows and knees. Are you all right? Said a man. Thorne used his cane to level himself onto his feet and shoved his back against the wall, glad for its support and protection. Yeah, thanks. If there's one thing I hate, it's a guy who goes berserk when he gets caught cheating. If you're going to do it, you have to be ready to take the fallout like a man. Good policy, but I think he was more upset over you insulting his woman. Thorne cringed and wiped some blood from his mouth. He was glad that, at least, all his teeth felt secure. Don't tell me she was not an escort droid. I could have sworn. Oh, she's definitely an escort. Cute one, too. It's just a lot of men don't like admitting that their arm accessory is bottom programmed. Readjusting the bandana, Thorne shook his head. Again, if you're going to do it, own it like a man. Not to be rude, but do I know you? Jamal, from the caravan. Oh, so I was supposed to give him the accent. Well, fuck, I'll keep doing that. Jamal, from the caravan. Jamal, right. Thanks for the rescue. My pleasure. You probably want to get some ice on that eye. Come on, let's get you out of this mess before anyone else takes a disliking to you. Chapter 32. Ah! Thorne moaned, placing a cooling pack against his throbbing cheekbone. Why did he have to hit so hard? You're lucky he didn't break your nose or knock around any teeth, said Jamal. Thorne could hear him shuffling around, followed by glasses clinking together. That's true. I am rather attached to my nose. There's a chair behind you. Thorne tested the floor with his cane until it struck something hard, and eased himself onto the chair. He leaned the cane against the side and adjusted the pack on his cheekbone. Here. Here. He held out his free hand and was glad when a cold, condensation-slicked glass was put into it. He sniffed at first. The drink smelled faintly of lemons. Taking a sip, he found that it was cold and frothy, tart and delicious. The absence of sudden warmth suggested there was no alcohol. Tamar Hindi, said Jamal. Tamarind juice, my favorite thing in the trading cities. Thank you. Thorne took a bigger gulp, his cheeks puckering from the sourness. Have you always been such a gambler? Jamal asked. I guess you could say I enjoy a challenge. No survival skills? That's honeymoon in the desert. Can't see? Let's go play some cards. I would have won, too, if that guy hadn't gotten so touchy. He thought he heard a chuckle, but then Jamal slurped at his drink. Where were you the whole time? Watching that escort droid bleed me dry and not saying anything? If a blind man wants to lose his head in a suicide card game, why should I stop him? Thorne relaxed against the back of the chair. I guess I can respect that. I am curious why you didn't bring your girl with you. I'd have thought she'd be a valuable asset. I thought she could use the rest. Thorne adjusted the cooling pack on his face. Plus, I don't think she's ever played Royals before, and there are all those tricky rules to explain. And she probably wouldn't have you been pleased about you wanting an escort droid? Thorne guffawed. Oh, no. I didn't want the escort droid for me. I thought she'd make a nice gift. A silence followed, and he was sure he could picture the skepticism on Jamal's face, despite having no idea what Jamal looked like. She was for this android spaceship friend of mine. It's complicated. It always is. Jamal clinked their glasses together. I get it, though. You get your hands on an escort droid, all the while everyone's keeping attention away from the true prize upstairs. You do seem like the protective sort. Thorne's instincts hummed at something in Jamal's tone. Well, I guess I am a lucky man. Yes, you are. A girl like that doesn't fall out of the sky every day. Thorne kept his smile for a heartbeat, then down the rest of the drink. His nose crinkled. Speaking of Mrs. Smith, I should get back to her. Promised to bring up some food and then got carried away. You know how it is. I wouldn't be in a hurry, said Jamal. I saw her with Gina a couple hours ago. I think the ladies were going out for some refreshments. The grin froze on Thorne's face. Now he knew for sure something wasn't right. Cress leave the hotel without telling him? Not likely. But why would Jamal lie about something like that? Good, he said, hiding his uncertainty. He set the empty glass down on the floor, tucking it beneath the chair so he wouldn't trip on it later. Cress could use some girly time. Did they happen to say where they were going? No, but there are plenty of eateries on this street. Why? Afraid she might run off without you? Thorne snorted, but it sounded forced even to him. Nah, this will be good for her. Making friends, eating stuff, exploring all that Earth has to offer. His expression must have been hilarious because Jamal's laugh was loud and abrupt. Oh, so exploring all that Earth has to offer? Whatever. No, because he would laugh after he said that. Exploring all that Earth has to offer? His expression must have been hilarious because Jamal's laugh was loud and abrupt. I knew you wouldn't be surprised, he said. Quinde thought you didn't know she was lunar, but I figured you would. You strike me as the type of man who has a keen sense of value, especially when I saw you bargaining for that escort droid downstairs. Even blind, you do seem to have an impeccable taste in female companionship. This is true, Thorne murmured, trying to recapture his conversation. Sense of value, impeccable taste. What was he talking about? So tell me how you came across her. It was a lunar satellite, I've got that much, but how did you get tangled up with her to begin with? Did you find her still in space or down here in the desert? Must have been space, I guess. There was that pause ship in the wreckage. It's kind of a long story. No matter. I'm not like I'm going to be up in space anytime soon, but then to crash. That couldn't have been part of your original plan. Tell me this. Did you plan on bringing her to Africa the whole time, or are there more lucrative markets elsewhere in the Union? I thought Africa... You said they've been gone for a couple of hours? Thorne scratched at his jaw. Give or take. Chair-leg squeaked across the floor. So you must have known she was a shell when you found her. Couldn't find me trading in their kind otherwise. Don't care how much they're worth. Thorne spread his free hand out on his knee and pressed his sudden panic into it. So they knew about the crashed satellite, and they knew Cress was a shell, and they seemed to be under the impression there was a market for that. And that Thorne wanted to what? Sell her? Trade her as stolen goods? Was there some strange black market demand for shells that he wasn't aware of? Honestly, Lunar's terrifying me too, he said, trying to hide his ignorance. But not Cress. She's harmless. Harmless and not terrible to look at either. So short, though. There were footsteps. Jamal walking to the other side of the room. Something being poured. Another drink? Thorne eased his tense knuckles off his own leg. I'm fine, thank you. Glass on wood. So do you know where you're taking her yet? Or are you still shopping around for a good price? I figured you were probably taking her to that old doctor in Farafara. Ah, they're talking about Dr. Erland. But I have to tell you, I think Gina's interested. Could save you a lot of trouble. Thorne smothered his discomfort and tried to imagine they weren't talking about Cress at all. They were business associates, discussing merchandise. He just had to figure out what Jamal knew that he clearly didn't. He slipped his finger beneath his blindfold, stretching the fabric away from his eyes. It was becoming too tight, and his cheek was throbbing more painfully than ever. Interesting proposition, he said slowly. But why deal with the middleman when I can go straight to the end buyer? Convenience. We'll take her off your hands, and you can be off on the next treasure hunt. Plus, we know this market better than anyone. We'll make sure she ends up in a nice place, if you care about that sort of thing. He paused. What were you hoping to get for her, anyway? Merchandise, business transactions. He attempted nonchalance, but his skin was crawling, and he found it difficult to set aside the memory of Cress's hand in his. Make me an offer, he said. There was a long hesitation. I can't speak for Gina. Then why are we having this conversation? Sounds to me like you're wasting my time. Thorne reached for his cane. She did give me a number, said Jamal. Thorne paused, and after a long silence, Jamal continued. But I'm not qualified to finalize anything. We could at least find out if we're all playing the same game. More slurping, followed by a long sigh. We could offer you 20,000 for her. This time the shock was impossible to hide. Thorne felt like Jamal had just kicked him in the chest. 20,000 univs? Oh no, the way that it's written. 20,000 univs? A sharp laugh rang off the walls. Too low? You'll have to discuss that with Gina, but if you don't mind me asking, what were you hoping to get for her? Thorne snapped his mouth shut. If their starting offer was 20,000 univs, what do they think she was really worth? He felt like a fool. What was this? Lunar trafficking? Some sort of weird fetishism? She was a girl. A living girl. Smart and sweet and awkward and unusual, and she was worth far more than they could ever realize. Don't be shy, Mr. Smith. You must have had some number in mind. His thoughts started to clear, and it occurred to him that in many ways he was just like these people. A businessman out to make a quick profit, who'd only been lucky enough to stumble onto a naive, overly trusting lunar shell. Except he had a bad habit of just taking the things he wanted. He dug his fingernails into his thighs. If she was worth that much, why wouldn't they simply take her? Panic swept through him, like a lightning bolt arcing through every limb. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a distraction. He'd been right before. Jamal was wasting his time, intentionally. Thorne dropped the cooling pack and launched himself out of the chair, grabbing the cane. He was at the door in 2 strides, his hand fumbling for the knob, yanking over the door. Cress! He yelled, trying to remember how many doors they'd passed to get to Jamal's room. He was turned around, unable to remember which side of the hall his and Cress's room had been on to begin with. Cress! He stormed down the hall, pounding aimlessly on the walls and doors as he passed. Can I help you, master? He spun toward the female voice, his optimism thinking for a second that it was her, but no. The sound was too airy and fake, and Cress called him captain. Who would call him master? Who's that? My previous master called me darling, said the voice. I'm your new escort droid. The house rules gave my former master a choice of returning your earnings to you or accepting your offered trade. He chose the trade, which means that I am now your personal property. You seem stressed. Would you like me to sing a relaxing song while I rub your shoulders? Okay, I know that's not the voice I gave her a minute ago, but that's what we're sticking with now. Realizing that he was gripping his cane like a weapon, Thorne shook his head. Roommate, where is it? He heard a couple of doors open down the hallway. Cress! No, he'd be... Cress? No, that would be stronger. He'd say, Cress? What's all the noise about, man? Said a man. Someone else started talking in that language Thorne didn't recognize. Here's room 8, said the escort. Shall I knock? Yes. He followed the sound of her knocking and tested the doorknob. Locked. He cursed. Cress! I'm trying not to scream too loud in the microphone to fuck with y'all's ears. Can we keep it down out here? I'm afraid I'm programmed to avoid destruction of property, so I'm unable to break this door for you, master. Shall I go to the front desk and retrieve a key? Thorne pounded at the door again. She's not in there, said Jamal from down the hall. Yet that other language again, fast and annoyed. Shall I translate, master? Growling, Thorne marched back toward Jamal, his cane whipping against the corridor walls. He heard yelps of surprise as people ducked back into their rooms to avoid being hit. Where is she? And don't try to tell me she's out enjoying a pleasant meal in town. And what will you do if I won't tell you? Propose a staring contest? He despised that his alarm was showing, but every word raised his temperature, degree by boiling degree. It seemed like hours since he so flippantly said goodbye to Cress when she was still in the bath, when her singing was still echoing in his ears, and he'd left her. He'd just left her. And why? To show off his gambling skills? To prove that he was self-sufficient? To prove that he didn't need anyone? Not even her? Every moment that stretched on was agony. They could have taken her anywhere, done anything to her. She could be alone and frightened, wondering why he hadn't come for her, wondering why he'd abandoned her. He lashed out, his hand thwapping Jamal in the ear. Surprised, Jamal tried to duck away, but Thorne had already grabbed the front of his shirt and hauled him closer. Where is she? She's no longer your concern. If you were so attached, I guess you should have kept a better eye on her, rather than running off and flirting with the first steel-boned escort that passed by. He placed a hand over Thorne's. She saw that, you know. Saw that escort hanging all over you downstairs. Looked pretty shaken up by the sight. Didn't even hesitate when Gina offered to take her away. Thorne gritted his teeth as blood rushed to his face. He couldn't tell whether Jamal was lying, but the thought of Cress seeing him gambling with that escort droid and having no idea what he was really doing. See? It's all just business. You lost her, we took her. At least you got a pretty new toy out of the deal, so try not to feel too upset. Grimacing, Thorne tightened his grip around the cane and brought it up as hard as he could, right between Jamal's legs. Jamal roared. Backing up, Thorne swung the cane toward his head, cracked it hard, but was quickly jerked out of his hand as Jamal let off a stream of curses. Thorne reached for the gun that he'd nearly forgotten since he and Cress left the satellite. He pulled it from his waistband and took aim. Screams from the other people in the hall bounced down the corridors, followed by slamming of doors and the pounding of feet on the stairway. From this distance, he said, I'm pretty sure I can hit you a few times. I wonder how many shots I can get in before I get a fatal one. He listed his head. Then I guess I'll just take your port screen, which probably has all your business contacts in it. You said something about a doctor in Farawada? I guess we'll try him first. He released the safety. Wait! You're right! They were taking her to Farafra. Just a tiny oasis about 300 kilometers northeast of here. There's some doctor there who wants a thing for lunar shells. Thorne took a step back into the hallway, though he kept the gun up and ready. Escort droid, you still there? Yes, master. Can I be of assistance? Get me the coordinates of a town called Farafra, and the fastest way to get there. You're an idiot to go after her, said Jamal. She'll already be sold, and that old man isn't going to pay for her twice. You should just cut your losses and move on. She's just a lunar shell. She isn't worth it. If you honestly believe that, said Thorne, stowing the gun again, then you really don't recognize true value when you see it. Look, Thorne. Thorne, I love you, buddy. You're amazing. You're absolutely fantastic. Truly, this series would not be complete without you. However, in the same breath, fuck's wrong with you, dude? Why'd you just leave Cress? I'm still upset about that. But he's trying to make amends. He's trying to do what's right. He realized his mistake. Chapter 33. Cress crouched in the corner of the van, gripping her knee against her chest. She was trembling, despite the sweltering heat. She was thirsty and hungry, and her shins were bruised where they collided with the van's ledge. Though she'd pulled down the bolts of fabric to sit on, the constant jerking of the truck on the uneven ground made her backside ache. The night was so dark she couldn't see her hand in front of her face, but sleep wouldn't come. Her thoughts were too erratic as she tried to discern what these people wanted with her. She'd played the moments before her capture over in her head 100 times, and Gina's expression had definitely lit up when Cress had confirmed Gina's suspicions. She was a shell. A worthless shell. Why had Gina sensed value in that? She racked her brain, but nothing made sense. She tried her best to remain calm, tried to be optimistic, tried to tell herself that Thorne would come for her, but doubts kept crowding out the hope. He couldn't see. He didn't know where she'd gone. He probably didn't even know she was missing yet, and when he found out, what if he thought she'd abandoned him? What if he didn't care? She couldn't forget the image of Thorne sitting at that card table with some strange girl draped over him. He hadn't been thinking about Cress then. Perhaps Thorne wouldn't come for her. Perhaps she'd been wrong about him all this time. Perhaps he wasn't a hero at all, but just a selfish, arrogant, womanizing. She sobbed, her head cluttered with too much fear and anger and jealousy and horror and confusion, all of it writhing and squirming in her thoughts until she couldn't keep her frustrated screams bottled up any longer. She wailed, scrunching her hair in her fists until her scalp burned, but her screams died out fast, replaced with clenched teeth as she attempted to calm herself again. She rubbed her fingers around her wrist, as if she had long strands of hair to wrap around them. She swallowed hard in an attempt to gulp down the rising panic, to keep herself from hyperventilating. Thorne would come for her. He was a hero. She was a damsel. And that's how the stories went. That's how they always went. Ugh. With a groan, she settled into her corner and started to cry again. Cried until no more tears would come. Suddenly, she jolted awake. There was salt dried on her cheeks and her back ached from being hunched over. Her butt and sides were bruised from the bumping of the van, which she realized had come to a stop. She was instantly alert, the grogginess shaken off by a new wave of fear. There was a hint of light coming through the cracks around the doors, which meant they'd driven through the night. A door slammed and she could make out Gina's chatter, no longer friendly and comforting. The van shook as the driver got out. "Making good time," Cress heard a man say. "Someone want to help me back here." Another man laughed. "Can't take the low away for yourself?" Gina's voice cut through their boasting. "Try not to bruise her. I want top payment this time, and you know how he negotiates, nitpicking every little thing." Cress gulped as the boots came closer. She steeled herself. She would lunge. She would fight. She would be ferocious. Bite and scratch and kick if she had to. She would take him by surprise, and then she would run. Fast as a cheetah, graceful as a gazelle. It was still early. The sand would be cool on her bare feet. Her blisters were almost healed, and while her legs still ached horribly, she could ignore them. Hopefully they would deem her not worth coming after. Or maybe they would shoot her. She gulped down the thought. She had to take the risk. The lock clanked. She took in a deep breath, waited for the door to open, and pounced. A guttural scream was ripped out of her, all her anger and vulnerability swelling up and unleashing in that one vicious moment as her clawed fingers scrabbled for his eyes. The man caught her. Two hands snapped around her pale wrists. Her momentum kept her careening outside the truck, and she would have tumbled to the sand if he hadn't held her half suspended. Her war cry was abruptly cut off. The man started to laugh, laughing at her pathetic attempts to overpower him. "She's a tiger, I'll give you that," he said to the man who had teased him. She twisted Cress around so he could hold both her wrists in one firm grip. Her body still dangled from his hold as he began marching her away from the van and into the dunes. "Let me go!" she shrieked, kicking back at him, but he was undeterred by her flailing. "Where are you taking me? Let me go!" "Calm down, little girl. I'm not going to hurt you. Wouldn't be worth it." He snorted and dropped her down on the other side of the dune. She stumbled and rolled a couple times in the sand before bolting into a crouch. She swiped hair and sand from her face. By the time she looked up at the man, he had a gun pinned on her. Her heart sputtered. "Try to run, I shoot. And I don't mean to kill, but you're smarter than that, aren't you? You've got nowhere to go anyway, right?" Cress gulped. She could still hear the voices on the other side of the dune. She hadn't been able to tell how many caravanners were still along in the group. "What do you want from me?" "I suspect you have business to tend to." Standing, she stumbled a bit down the hill, the sand unstable beneath her. The man didn't flinch. He jerked the barrel of the gun toward her feet. "Go on. It'll be another few hours before we stop, so you better get it out of the way now. Don't want you losing your water in the back of that nice van. We wouldn't get our security deposit back, and Gina hates that." Her lower lip trembled, and she cast another glance around the desert, the wide openness of this barren landscape. She shook her head. "No, I can't. Not with... I won't watch." To prove his point, he spun around and scratched behind his ear with the gun. "Just make it quick." She spotted another man over the dune, faced away from her, and suspected he was relieving himself. Cress turned away, ashamed and embarrassed. She wanted to cry, wanted to beg for the man to let her be, just to leave her here. But she knew it wouldn't work, and she didn't want to beg this man for anything. Thorne would come for her, she thought as she stumbled to the base of the dune in search of what privacy she could find. Thorne had to come for her. Now, I can't begin to imagine the kind of torment that has to be when you're a hostage. You're being sold her skin because of something that you couldn't control. She's been on Earth for like 2 weeks tops, and she's already being part of the slave trade. What shit luck, dude. And I blame Thorne for what's happening right now because he just left her to go play cards. I like Thorne. I like him a lot. It's his goddamn fault that Cress is being treated this way. But he better make it right. I'm just like, why would you do this? Why are you like this, Thorne? She's having to pee in the middle of the desert at basically at gunpoint because you wanted to play cards to show that you don't need anyone's help. Come on, Thorne. Get this fucking microphone out of my face. Oh, God. One of these days, I just want to record something without, like, burps going anywhere. Chapter 34. Fatine G? Oh, no. Fatine G? The girl spun around, her long black braids swinging against her lab coat. Your Majesty! A ghost smile flickered over Kai's face. Do you have a moment to assist us with something? Of course! Fatine tucked a port screen into her coat pocket. Kai moved toward the wall of the white corridor, allowing room for researchers and technicians to pass by. We need access to some patient records. I realize they're probably confidential, but... Kai trailed off. There was no but, only a vague hope and a fair amount of confidence that his title was the only credential he needed. But Fatine's gaze darkened as they flickered between him and Thorne. Patient records? A few weeks ago, said Kai, I came to check on Dr. Erlon's progress and Lynn Cinder was here. The lunar cyborg from... I know who Lynn Cinder is, she said, her hardness fading as quickly as it had come. Right, of course. He cleared his throat. Well, at the time, the doctor told me she was there fixing a med droid, but I was thinking about it, and I thought maybe she'd actually been a draft subject? Yes. Fatine shrugged. Actually, she was a volunteer. Come on, there should be a vacant lab you can use. I'm happy to pull up Lynn Cinder's records for you. He and Thorne followed her. She wasn't a volunteer, though. Fucking her stepmom volunteered for her so she could get the money, which I really hope that Kai finds that out. That way he understands how much she's a bitch. He and Thorne followed her. Kai wondered whether she would have been as accommodating had it been any other patient. Since the arrest, Lynn Cinder had become a matter of public concern, and therefore her private records weren't so private anymore. She was a volunteer. Really? No, she was a volunteer? Really? Yes, I was here the day she was brought in. They'd had to override her system to get her in here. I guess she put up quite a fight when they came for her. Kai frowned. Why would a volunteer put up a fight? I'm using volunteer in the official sense. I believe her legal guardian recommended her for the testing. She swiped her wrist over an ID scanner, then ushered them into Lab 6D. The room smelled of bleach and peroxide, and every surface glistened to a perfect shine. A counter along the far wall was set before a window overlooking a quarantine room. Kai grimaced, reminded of his father's last days spent in a room not entirely unlike that one, although his had been equipped with blankets and pillows, his favorite music, a tranquil water fountain. The patients who came to these labs would not have received the same luxuries. Fatine paced to the adjoining wall. Screen on, she said, tapping something into her port screen. I do believe these records were a part of the investigation following her jailbreak, Your Majesty. Do you think that detectives may have missed something? He threaded his fingers through his hair. No, I'm just trying to answer some of my own questions. The lab's login screen faded, replaced with a patient profile. Her profile. Lynn Cinder, licensed mechanic, ID number 0097917305, born 29 November 109 TE, resident of New Beijing, Eastern Commonwealth, ward of Lynn Adri, cyborg ratio 36.28%. Is there something specific you're looking for? Fatine asked, sliding her fingers along the screen so that the profile trekked down into blood type A, allergies none, and medications unknown. Then the plague test. Kai stepped closer. What's this? The doctor's notes from when we injected her with the letumosis microbe solution, how much we gave her, and subsequently how long it took for her body to rid itself of the disease. At the end of the study, the simple words. Conclusion. Letumosis immunity confirmed. Immunity. Immunity, said Thorne, coming to stand beside them. Did we know about this? Perhaps the detectives didn't think it was relevant to their search, but it's common knowledge here in the labs. Many of us have theorized it's a result of her lunar immune system. There's a long-held theory that letumosis was brought here by migrating lunars who are unaffected carriers of the disease. Kai fidgeted with his shirt collar. How many lunars would have to come to Earth to create such a widespread epidemic? The strings of fate are unraveling. Kai is figuring it out. If this theory was correct, they could have had a lot more fugitives on the planet than he realized. He groaned at the thought. The mere idea of having to deal with more lunars made him want to beat his head against a wall. What does this mean? Asked Thorne, pointing to a box at the bottom of the profile. Additional notes. Finally, I found her. The words gave Kai a chill, but he wasn't sure why. Bettine shook her head. Nobody knows. Dr. Erland entered it, but he gave no indication of what it meant. Probably it refers to her immunity. He finally found what he was looking for when she was brought in. Her tone became bitter, though lots of good it did us when both of them decided to skip town. Bettine's port pinged and she glanced down at it. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. It seems today's draft subject has just arrived. Kai ripped his attention away from those haunting words. The draft is still in effect? Of course, Bettine said with a smile, and Kai realized what a stupid question it was. Here he was, the Emperor, and he had no idea what was going on in his own country, in his own research labs. I thought, with Dr. Erland gone, I just thought maybe it was over, he explained. Dr. Erland may be a traitor, but we still have quite a lot of people here who believe in what we're doing. We won't quit until we find a cure. You're doing great work here, said Thorne. The Crown appreciates all the advances that have been made already in these labs. Bettine tucked her port back into her pocket. We've all lost someone to this disease. Kai's tongue grew heavy. Bettine Ji, did Dr. Erland ever inform you that Queen Levana has developed an antidote? She blinked at him, confused. Queen Levana? He glanced at Cinder's chart, evidence of her immunity and her lunar biology. A part of our marriage alliance will include the manufacturing and distribution of this antidote. Thorne's voice was terse. Though His Majesty will require that this information remain confidential until the Crown issues an official statement. I see, she said slowly, still watching Kai. That would change everything. It would. Her calm pinged again, shaking off her surprise. Bettine bowed to Kai. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. If you would excuse me? Of course. Thorne gestured toward the hall. Thank you for your assistance. My pleasure. Take all the time you need. She bowed and left the lab with her braids swinging. The moment the door closed behind her, Thorne scowled at the Emperor. What reason did you have for giving her that information? Until the antidote is confirmed to be both as effective, harmless, and capable of reproduction, it's foolhardy to spread such rumors. I know, said Kai. It just seemed like she should know. She mentioned the draft, and I realized how many people are still dying. Not just being killed by the disease, but being killed by us while we try to find a cure. And all the while, the antidote is out there, just out of... His eyes widened. Immunity confirmed. Stars! The Queen's antidote! Pardon me? Cinder was here the day I gave the antidote to Dr. Erland. He must have given it to her, and she went straight to the quarantine knowing that she was immune. She was taking it to her sister, trying to save her. But she must have been too late, so she gave the antidote to that little boy instead, Cheng Sunto. He shook his head, surprised at how light this realization made him. He found himself smiling. Her guardian is wrong. Cinder didn't take her sister's ID chip because she was jealous or she wanted to steal her identity or anything like that. She took it because she loved her. And you believe that cutting out a loved one's ID chip is a healthy response? Maybe she'd somehow figured out that the androids were harvesting them and giving them to Lunars. Or maybe she was just in shock, but I don't think it was out of malice. He collapsed against a wall, feeling as if he'd just discovered an important clue in the mystery that was Lin Cinder. We should let Bettine Ji and the others know that Cheng Sunto wasn't a miraculous recovery. This confirms that the Queen's antidote is real, and maybe they can use that information in their research. It might be useful, or... His elbow bumped the net screen, and an image shimmered beside him. Kai jumped away as the holograph projected out of the screen, rotating within arm's reach. It was a girl, life-size, her different layers flickering and folding into one another. Skin and scar tissue melded with a steel hand and leg. Wires merged with her nervous system. Blue blood pumped through silicone heart chambers. All the inorganic tissue had a faint glow as the holograph pinpointed what wasn't natural about her so that the untrained eye could comprehend. Cyborg. Kai backed away, feeling disoriented as he gaped at her. Even her eyes had that faint glow to them, along with the optic nerves that stretched the back of her brain, where there was a metal plate fitted with ports and cables and wires and an access hatch that opened in the back of her skull. She remembered her guardian saying that Cinder was unable to cry, but he'd never expected this. Her eyes. Her brain. He looked away and dragged a palm down his face. This was an invasion, a terrible kind of voyeurism, and the sudden guilt made him wish he could erase the sight from his mind forever. Screen off. A silence engulfed them, and he wondered if Thorne felt the same guilt he did, or if he'd even been caught by the same morbid curiosity. Are you all right, Your Majesty? Fine. We knew she was a cyborg. None of this should be a surprise. I just hadn't expected it to be so much. So much. There we go. Thorne slid his hand into his pockets. I'm sorry. I know I haven't always been fair where Lynn Cinder was concerned. From the moment I saw you talking to her at the ball, I've been worried she would be an unnecessary distraction to you, and you were already dealing with so much. But it's obvious that you did have legitimate feelings for her. I'm sorry for all that's happened since then. Kai shrugged uncomfortably. The problem with that is that I don't even... Fuck. The problem with that is that I don't even know if I had legitimate feelings for her, or if it was just a trick. Your Majesty, the lunar gift has limitations. If Lynn Cinder had been forcing these feelings onto you, then you wouldn't still be feeling them. Starting, Kai met Thorne's gaze. I don't... He gulped, heat climbing up his neck. Isn't that obvious? Well, as Queen Levana likes to point out, you are still young, and not yet adept at disguising your emotions like the rest of us. Thorne smiled, a teasing look that crinkled the corners of his eyes. To be frank, I feel that is one of your better qualities. Kai rolled his eyes. Ironically, I think that might be why I liked Cinder so much in the first place. That she couldn't disguise her emotions. That she didn't try. At least that's how it seemed. Kai leaned back against the exam table, feeling the sterile paper crinkle beneath his fingers. Sometimes it just seems like everyone around me is pretending. The Lunars are the worst. Levana and her entourage, everything about them is so fake. I'm engaged to Levana, and I still don't even know what she really looks like. But it isn't just them, it's the other union leaders, even my own cabinet members. Everyone is trying to impress everyone else, trying to make themselves out to be smarter or more confident than they really are. He raked his hand through his hair. And then there was Cinder, this completely normal girl working this completely mundane job. She was always covered in dirt or grease, and she was so brilliant the way when she was fixing things. And she joked about stuff with me, like she was talking to a normal guy, not a prince. Everything about her seemed so genuine. At least, that's what I thought. But then it turned out she was just like everyone else. Thorne paced to the window, overlooking the quarantine room. And yet you're still trying to find reasons to believe in her. It was true. The whole escapade had been sparked by Thorne's accusations that Kai didn't know anything about Cinder. That even now, knowing that she was cyborg, knowing that she was lunar, he still wanted to believe that not everything about her had been based on some complicated deception. And in coming here, he had learned some things. He had learned that she was immune to letimosis, that maybe all lunars were. He had learned that those brown eyes that kept infiltrating his dreams had been man-made, or at least had been tampered with. He had learned that her guardian had sold her body off for testing, and that she hadn't hated her sister, and that the cyborg draft was still in effect, still ordering cyborgs to the lab every day, still sacrificing them in order to find an antidote that Queen Levana already had. Why cyborgs? He murmured. Why do we only use cyborgs for the draft? Thorne sighed. All due respect, Your Majesty, do you really think this is the best issue to be concerning yourself with right now? With the wedding, the alliance, the war? Yes, I do. It's a valid question. How did our society decide that their lives are worth less? I'm responsible for everything that happens in this government. Everything. And when something affects the citizens like this, the thought struck him like a bullet. They weren't citizens. Or they were. But it was more complicated than that. Had been since the Cyborg Protection Act had been instated by his grandfather decades ago. The act came after a series of devastating cyborg crimes that had caused widespread hatred and led to catastrophic riots in every major city in the Commonwealth. The protests may have been prompted by the violent spree, but they were a result of generations of growing disdain. For years, people had been complaining about the rising population of cyborgs, many of whom received their surgeries at the hand of taxpayers. Cyborgs were too smart, people had complained. They were cheating the average man out of his wages. Cyborgs were too skilled. They were taking jobs away from hard-working average citizens. Cyborgs were too strong. They shouldn't be allowed to compete in sporting events with regular people. It gave them an unfair advantage. And then one small group of cyborgs had gone on a spree of violence and theft and destruction, demonstrating just how dangerous they could be. If doctors and scientists were going to continue to perform these operations, people argued there needed to be restrictions placed on their kind. They needed to be controlled. Kai had studied it all when he was 14 years old. He had agreed with the laws. He'd been convinced, as his grandfather before him had been, that they were so obviously right. Cyborgs required special laws and provisions for the safety of everyone. Didn't they? Until this moment, he didn't think he'd give the question a second thought. Realizing that he'd been staring at an empty lab table with his knuckles pressed against his forehead, he turned around and stood a little higher. Thorne was watching him with that ever-present, wise expression that so often drove him crazy, waiting patiently for Kai to form his thoughts. Is it possible the laws are wrong? He said, peculiarly nervous, like he was speaking blasphemy against his family and his country's age-old traditions. About cyborgs? Thorne peered at him for a long time, giving no hint to what he thought of Kai's question, until he finally sighed. The Cyborg Protection Act was written up with good intentions. The people saw a need to control the growing cyborg population, and the violence has never again reached the level that it was at that time. Kai's shoulders sloped. Thorne was probably right. His grandfather had probably been right. And yet, said Thorne, I believe it is the mark of a great leader to question the decisions that came before him. Perhaps once we're solved of our more immediate problems, we can readdress this. More immediate problems. I don't disagree with you, Thorne, but there's a draft subject in this very research wing at this very moment. I'm sure this seems like an immediate problem to him. Or her. Your Majesty, you cannot solve every problem in a week. You need to give yourself time. You agree that it's a problem, then? Thorne frowned. Thousands of citizens are dying from this disease. Would you discontinue the draft and the research opportunities it provides on the basis that the Lunars are going to solve this for us? No, of course not, but using cyborgs, and only cyborgs, it seems wrong, doesn't it? It seems wrong. Doesn't it? Because of Cinder? No! Because of everyone! Because whatever science has made them, because they were human too. They were once human too. And I can't believe that they're all monsters. Whose idea was the draft anyway? Where did it come from? Thorne glanced toward the net screen, looking strangely conflicted. If I recall, it was Dmitri Erlon's idea. We had many meetings about it. Your father wasn't sure at first, but Dr. Erlon convinced us that it was the best for the Commonwealth. Cyborgs are easy to register, easy to track, and with their legal restrictions, easy to take advantage of. No, Your Majesty. Easy to convince both them and the people that they are the best candidates for the testing. Because they aren't human? He could see that Thorne was growing frustrated. Because their bodies have already been aided by science, because it's now their turn to give back. For the good of everyone. They should have a choice. They had a choice when they accepted the surgical alterations. Everyone is well aware what the laws are regarding cyborg rights. Kai thrust his finger toward the blackened netscreen. Cinder became a cyborg when she was 11, after a freak hover accident. You think an 11-year-old has a choice about anything? Her parents... Thorne paused. According to the file, Cinder's parents had died in that same hover accident. She didn't know who had approved her cyborg surgery. Thorne set his mouth into a straight, displeased line. She is an unusual circumstance. Maybe so, but it still doesn't feel right. Kai paced to the quarantine window, rubbing a knot in his neck. I'm putting an end to it. Today. Are you sure this is the message you want to send to the people? That we're giving up on an antidote? We're not giving up. I'm not giving up. But we can't force people into this. We'll raise the grant money for volunteers. We'll increase our awareness programs. Encourage people to volunteer themselves if they choose to. But as of now, the draft is over. It took falling in love with a cyborg girl to realize that the draft was a stupid fucking idea to begin with. Look, I get it. I see their viewpoint, and yes. Yeah. Okay, right, you can do that. It's a big moral issue. The cyborg draft is a big moral issue, and I'm happy that Kai got to this point, but Thorne also has a point, and I'm conflicted. I don't even know how I even feel about this, but I think Kai is right for ending the cyborg draft. But I don't know. Because on the one hand, it's like, yes, they already gave their bodies to science. They should be helping. But at the same time, it's like, they're people too? They're not just machines, even though that's what everyone sees them as. I don't fucking know, dude. It's conflicting. It's emotionally conflicting. You gotta do it. In the name of science, you gotta do it. But where do you draw the line? It makes me think of Rapture, that underwater city that Andrew Ryan was in charge of. No gods, no kings, only men, or something like that. And it makes you realize that it's a morality issue. Can you sacrifice lives for the greater good? Yes, obviously you can, but who gets to choose that? And the way that they're doing it by random draft, because we know it's established as it's a random draft. Cyborgs are randomly selected for this process. Right. They are right to... They were right to do the cyborg draft. They were right to do it the way that they did it. I agree, and I am happy that they did it because I would have done the same thing if I had to make that decision. At the same time, Kai is now right to discontinue it because there's the possible cure for leishmaniasis. Yes, it's being held by foreign powers. Yes, it's being held by a possibly... Not even possibly, a definitely hostile foreign force. Right. But it should be paused until that antidote can be secured. And if it can't be secured, then it is to be continued. Because this isn't just some testing microbes in a lab. These are lives. These are real human lives. And that, the suffering of human dignity should be put on hold until all other options are exhausted. That's what I think. That's what I think. It's a huge moral dilemma. It's a huge fucking moral dilemma. Remember when this fucking series was about a cyborg girl who was trying her best not to fall in love with a prince? Yeah, can we go back to simpler times, please? Chapter 35. Instead, we're trying to find out the fucking source of what it is to be human. God, it's Evangelion all over again. What is reminding me on my... Fucking, my calendar's reminding me. Thank you, that it's today. Chapter 35. Cinder stumbled up the ship's ramp, pulling her shirt away from her hips in an effort to get some airflow against her skin. The desert heat was dry compared to the suffocating humidity of New Beijing, but it was also relentless. Then there was the sand. That annoying, hateful sand. It's rough, it's coarse, it gets everywhere. Oh god, make the burping stop. Fuck. Why did I eat a sandwich before this? Ugh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's gross. I'm sorry. Don't eat a peanut butter and jelly before you read a goddamn book out loud. Ugh. But it was a good peanut butter and jelly. A little too much peanut butter, but that's alright. It was grape jelly, by the way. If you're using strawberry, go fuck yourself. Just shitting on jelly and jam preferences. God forbid get me started on preserves. Anyway. She had spent what seemed like hours trying to clean it out from her cybernetic joints, discovering more nooks and crannies in her hand than she'd known existed. Aiko, close ramp, she said, sinking onto a crate. She was exhausted. All her time was spent worrying over Wolf and trying to be gracious to the townsfolk who had brought her so many gifts of sugar dates and sweet rolls and spiced curries that she wasn't sure if they were trying to thank her or fatten her up for a feast. On top of that were the constant arguments with Dr. Erland. He wanted her to focus on finding a way to get onto Luna without being captured, and while she had conceded that that would have to happen eventually, she was still set on putting a stop to the royal wedding first. After all, what did it matter if she dethroned Lavanna on Luna after she was crowned Empress of the Commonwealth? There had to be a way to do both. But the royal wedding was only a week away, and Aiko's clock seemed to tick faster with every hour. "How is he?" asked Aiko. Poor Aiko, who was stuck alone in the spaceship system for hours at a time, while Cinder was at the hotel. "The doctor started weaning him off the sedatives this morning," said Cinder. "He's afraid that if Wolf wakes up again when no one is there, he'll have a mental breakdown and re-injure himself. But I told him we can't keep him unconscious forever." The ship sighed around her, oxygen hissing out of the life support system. Reaching down, Cinder pulled off her boots and dumped the sand out onto the metal floor. "Has there been any news?" "Yes, 2 interesting developments, actually." The net screen on the wall brightened. On one side was a static order form with confidential emblazoned across the top. Despite the spark of curiosity it caused, Cinder's attention was drawn immediately to the other article and a picture of Kai. Emperor Cyborg demands immediate discontinuation of Cyborg draft. Heart skipping, Cinder hopped off the crates to get a better look. The very mention of the draft brought memories flooding back to her. Being taken by androids, waking up in a sterile quarantine room, strapped to the table, having a ratio detector forced into her head, and a needle plunged into her vein. The article opened with a video of Kai at a press conference, standing behind a podium. "Play video." "This policy change in no way indicates a sense of hopelessness," Kai was saying on the screen. "We are not giving up on finding a cure for leishmaniasis. Please be aware that our team has made stunning progress in the past months, and I am confident that we are on the verge of a breakthrough. I want all those who are suffering from this sickness or have loved ones who are battling it right now to know that this is not a sign of defeat. We will never give up until leishmaniasis has been eradicated from our society." He paused, his silence punctuated by flashes that bounced off the Commonwealth's flag behind him. "However, it recently came to my attention that the use of the cyborg draft to further our research was an antiquated practice that was neither necessary nor justifiable. We are a society that values human life, all human life. The purpose of our research facilities is to staunch the loss of that life as quickly and humanely as possible. The draft went against that value, and I believe belittled all that we accomplished in the 126 years since our country was formed. Our country was built on a foundation of equality and togetherness, not prejudice and hatred. Cinder watched him with the weakness in her limbs. She yearned to reach into the screen and wrap her arms around him and say thank you. Thank you. But thousands of miles away, she found herself hugging herself instead. I anticipate the criticism and backlash that this decision will cause, Kai continued. I am fully aware that letumosis is a problem that affects every one of us, and that my decision to end the cyborg draft without first conferencing with my cabinet and your representatives is both unexpected and unconventional. But I could not stand by while our citizens were being forced to sacrifice their lives under a mistaken belief that their lives are less valuable than those of their peers. The letumosis research team will be developing new strategies for the continuation of their research, and we at the Palace are optimistic that this change will not hinder our ongoing search for an antidote. We will continue accepting test subjects on a volunteer basis. There is a comm link below for anyone wanting more information on the volunteer process. Thank you. I will not be taking questions today. As Kai left the stage and was replaced with the press secretary, already trying to calm a boisterous crowd, Cinder sank to the floor. She could hardly believe what she'd heard. Kai's speech was not only about letumosis and research and medical procedures. His speech had been about equality, rights, moving past the hatred. With one speech, not 3 minutes spent behind the podium, Kai had begun to unravel decades of cyborg prejudice. Had he done it for her? She grimaced, wondering whether it was absurdly self-absorbed for her to even think that. After all, this declaration would save countless cyborg lives. It would set a new standard for cyborg rights and treatments. It wouldn't solve everything, of course. There was still the Cyborg Protection Act that claimed cyborgs as property of their guardians and limited their freedoms. But it was something. It was a start. And the question came back again and again. Had he done it for her? I know, said Aiko with a dreaminess in her tone, though Cinder hadn't said anything. He's fantastic. When she could focus her thoughts enough to skim through the rest of the article, Cinder saw that Kai was right. The hostility had already begun. This particular journalist had written a scathing criticism piece defending the cyborg draft and accusing Kai of unjust preferential treatment. Though he didn't mention Cinder directly, it would only be a matter of time before someone did. Kai had invited a cyborg to the annual ball, and they would use it against him. He would be attacked for this decision. Viciously. But he had done it anyway. Cinder, said Aiko. Have you moved on to the escort droids yet? She blinked. I'm sorry, what? The screen changed, pulling the first document to the forefront. Cinder shook her head to clear it. She had forgotten all about the second item that Aiko had wanted to tell her about. The order form labeled confidential. Oh, right. She pulled herself to her feet. She would think about Kai and his decision later, after she had found a way to keep him from marrying Levana. What is this? It's an order placed by the palace 2 days ago. I stumbled on it by accident when I was trying to figure out their florist order. Turns out the queen is having her bouquet made of lilies and hosta leaves. Boring. I would have gone with orchids myself. You found a confidential order form from the palace itself. Yes, I did. Thank you for noticing. I'm turning into quite the savvy hacker. Not that I have anything better to do. Cinder scanned the form. It was a rental agreement placed with the world's largest escort droid manufacturer, which was headquartered just outside New Beijing. The palace wanted 60 escorts for the day of the wedding, but only those from the reality line, which included models with average eye colors and varying body types. The idea was that such imperfections, as the company called them, gave a more lifelike experience with your escort. It took her about 4 seconds to grasp the order's purpose. They're going to use them to staff during the wedding, she said, because Lunars can't manipulate them. Smart. That's what I thought too, said Aiko. The agreement states that they'll be delivered to the florist and catering companies the morning of the wedding, and that they'll be smuggled into the palace along with the human staff. Well, it didn't use the word smuggle. It didn't exactly make Cinder feel better about the wedding, but she was glad that the palace was taking some precautions against their lunar guests. Then, as she read through the order form and the delivery instructions, she gasped. What is it? Said Aiko. I just had an idea. She took a step back, running it through in her head. The idea was too raw and messy for her to be certain, but on the surface... Aiko, that's it. That's how we're going to get onto Luna. The lights flickered. I don't compute. What if we hit on a ship that was already going to Luna? We could be smuggled in, just like these androids are being sneaked into the palace. Except all the ships that go to Luna are lunar ships. How will you get aboard one of them? Or how will you get aboard one of them? Right now they're all lunar ships, but I might know how we can change that. The feed on the net screen shifted, bringing the ticking clock front and center. Does it involve stopping the wedding? Yes, sort of. Oh wait, fuck. Does it involve stopping the wedding? Yes. Yes, sort of. Cinder held up a finger. If we can delay the wedding and persuade Queen Levana to host the ceremony on Luna instead of Earth, then all the Earthen guests will have to go there, just like all those lunar aristocrats are coming here. And then you'll be aboard one of their ships? If we can make it work. If we can make it work. She started to pace back and forth through the cargo bay, her thoughts burning with the start of a new plan. But I have to get Kai to trust me first. If he can persuade Levana to change the location... Chewing the inside of her cheek, Cinder glanced at the video of the press conference, the headline confirming that he really had ended the draft. We still need to get into the palace, but no more big distractions or hijacking the media. We need to be subtle, sneaky. Oh, you should post as a guest. Then you would have an excuse to buy a fancy dress, too. Cinder tried to protest, but hesitated. The idea had potential. If she could keep her glamour up long enough so that no one would recognize her. I would have to be wary of those escorts, plus we would need invitations. I'm on it! The order form disappeared, replaced with a streaming list of names. A gossip newsfeed posted a list of all the guests a few days ago. Did you know they're sending out actual paper invitations? Very classy. Sounds wasteful. Maybe so, but also easy to steal. How many do we need? 2? 3? Cinder ticked her fingers, one for her, one for Wolf, hopefully. If not, would it be better for her to go alone, or to bring the doctor, or even Jason? Levana and her entourage would recognize any of them, and she didn't trust that they were capable of creating strong enough glamours for themselves. I'm sorry. Names and title... 2, hopefully, she said. Names and titles dragged down the screen. Diplomats and political representatives, celebrities and media commentators, entrepreneurs and the very, very rich. She couldn't help thinking that it sounded like a real dull party. Then Aiko shrieked. An ear-splitting metal-on-metal, overheated processor and wires on fire shriek. Cinder covered her ears. What? What's wrong? The list of names stopped, and Aiko highlighted a line. Lynn Adri and daughter Lynn Pearl of New Beijing, Eastern Commonwealth, Earth. What the fuck? Why are they invited? No! 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 Why the fuck are Adri and Pearl invited to the wedding? What the fuck? I don't like this. Kai doesn't like them. Levana doesn't like... Well, maybe Levana saw them at the party, at the ball, and that they treated Cinder like shit, so she's doing it out of spite. Which, hey, to be honest, wouldn't put it past Levana, but also Levana hates Earthlings, so I don't think that would be it. So, why the fuck are Adri and Pearl invited to the wedding? Are they the entertainment in the middle of the ceremony where they get fucking decapitated and makes me happy? Ugh! I'm with Aiko on this. I'm pissed. I don't like it. Gaping, Cinder pulled her hands away from her ears. Lynn Adri? And Pearl? She heard footsteps thumping from the crew quarters, and Jason appeared in the cargo bay, eyes wide. What happened? Why is the ship screaming? Nothing. Everything's fine. Nothing. Everything's fine, Cinder stammered. No! Everything is not fine, said Aiko. How can they be invited? I've never seen a bigger injustice in all my in-programmed life, and believe me, I've seen some big injustices! Jason raised an eyebrow at Cinder. We just learned that my former guardian received an invitation to the wedding. She opened the table beside her tab beside her stepmother's name, thinking maybe it was a mistake. But of course not. Lynn Audrey had been awarded 80,000 univs and an official invitation to the royal wedding as an act of gratitude for her assistance in the ongoing manhunt for her adopted and estranged daughter, Lynn Cinder. She sold me out. Figures. Ah! Yes, of course. But 80,000 univs? She doesn't deserve one. God! No matter how many of these books? How many of these books and I think, oh, we're making progress. I don't have to hear about these people again. But no, Adri and Pearl have to shove themselves like a fucking wart on my brain. I don't like them. No, fuck them. Aiko's right. Fuck Letimosis. Fuck Levana trying to take over the planet. This is the real problem. We need to take out Adri and Pearl. The wedding can wait. This is the top priority. I hate them. Because she sold me out, she said, sneering. Figures. See? Injustice! Here we are, risking our lives to rescue Kai and this whole planet, and Adri and Pearl get to go to the royal wedding! I'm disgusted! I hope they spill soy sauce on their fancy dresses! Aiko, you're a gem. Don't ever change, please. Jason's concern turned to fast annoyance. Your ship has some messed up priorities. You know that. Aiko! My name is Aiko! If you don't stop calling me ship, I'm going to make sure you never have hot water during your showers again. Do you understand me? Yeah, hold that thought while I go disable the speaker system. What? You can't mute me! Cinder! Cinder held up her hands. Nobody is disabling anything. She glared at Jason, but his only response was a one-shouldered shrug. She rolled her eyes. You're both giving me a headache, and I'm trying to think. Jason leaned against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. Did you know I was there that night, at the Commonwealth Ball? Her eyelid twitched. How could I forget? She didn't think of it often, not since he'd joined their side, but sometimes when she looked at him, she couldn't help remembering how he had been the one to grab her and hold her while Levana taunted Kai, trying to bargain with Cinder's life. Flattered. Thing is, you were pretty memorable that night, too. What with being publicly humiliated, almost shot in the head, and ultimately arrested. So it strikes me as odd that you seem to be doing everything you can to figure out a way to go back there. She threw her hands in the air. And you can't think of a single reason why I would want to be at that wedding? One more fling with your toy before he becomes Levana's property? You were swooning over him an awful lot at the Cinder punched him. Jason stumbled against the wall, already chuckling as his hand came up to his cheekbone. Did I hit a nerve? Or was it a wire that time? You have plenty of both, right? He's not a toy, and he's not her property, she said. Insult either of us again, and next time I'll hit you with the metal fist. You tell him, Cinder! I had to do the snap. The snap was the right thing to do there. If Aiko had fingers, she would snap in a Z formation. She's that kind of girl. Jason lowered his hand, revealing a red mark. Why do you care? The wedding isn't your problem. Of course it's my problem! In case you haven't noticed, your queen is a tyrant! Maybe the Commonwealth doesn't want me anymore, but that doesn't mean I'm going to let Levana come down here and dig her claws into my country and ruin it like she ruined yours. Ours, he reminded her. Ours! He took a strand of hair out of his face. So that's it? Some overzealous sense of patriotism for a country that's trying to hunt you down as we speak? You do have some fried wires. In case you didn't realize, the second you step foot on Commonwealth soil, you're dead. Thanks for that stellar vote of confidence! And you don't really seem like the type of girl to sacrifice herself over some hyped-up delusions of true love. So what aren't you telling me? Cinder turned away. Oh, come on. Please don't tell me you're obsessing over this wedding because you think you're actually in love with him. I am, said Aiko. Madly. Cinder massaged her temple. After an awkward silence, Aiko said, We are still talking about Kai, right? Where did you even find her? Said Jason, gesturing at the ceiling speakers. I'm not just doing this for Kai. Cinder dropped her hand to her side. I'm doing this because I'm the only one who can. I'm going to overthrow Levana. I'm going to make sure she can't hurt anyone else. Jason gaped at her like she'd just sprouted an android arm out of the top of her head. You think that you are capable of overthrowing Levana? Screaming, Cinder threw her arms into the air. That's kind of the whole idea! Don't you? Isn't that the entire reason you're helping us? Stars no, I'm not crazy. I'm here because I saw an opportunity to get away from that thaumaturge without getting killed, and... He cut himself off. And what? His jaw flexed. And what? And it's what Her Highness would have wanted me to do, although she's probably going to die for it. Cinder furrowed her brow. What? And now I'm stuck with you and some backward plan you have that's going to get us all back to square one, right in the hands of Queen Levana. What? But... Her Highness? What are you even talking about? Princess Winter, who do you think? Princess... Who the fuck is Princess Winter? Hala. Hold the phone. Now, I realize I'm not the sharpest knife in the crayon drawer. Who the fuck is Princess Winter? Why are we 3 books in and we're just now hearing that there's a Princess Winter? Does Cinder have a sister? No, Cinder doesn't have a sister. She was the daughter of Queen Channery. So is Winter... But who the fuck did Levana have a kid with? Unless Cinder had a sister she didn't know about, or maybe it's a different part of the fucking family? Who the fuck is Princess Winter? I know the next book is called Winter, but who the fuck is Princess Winter? My throat hurts. Princess... Cinder drew a step away from him. You mean the Queen's stepdaughter? Oh! Said Aiko. Yeah, the only princess we've got, if you haven't noticed. Who do you think I was talking about? Cinder gulped. Her gaze flickered to the net screen, where their original plan had long since been hidden under news feeds and that blasted clock. Jason had never been told about their intention of interrupting the wedding and announcing her identity to the world. No, but... Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. Wait. Hang on. Jason is mentioning this Princess Winter girl. It's what Her Highness would have wanted, is what he said. Jason doesn't know that Cinder is fucking Celine! Oh, we were misled like a motherfucker! Oh my god! Didn't even occur to me because there was no fucking mention. Of course you're not going to think there's another princess. There's literally nothing that would allude to that. So Jason doesn't... What would he think if he found out that Cinder was Celine, though? This whole fucking time, and that's why he's being so like, fuck you, Cinder. But I'm still gonna do what I can. Oh, shit! Oh, what a fucking plot twist! Oh, god fucking damn! That's really fucking good! Nobody. She stammered, scratching her wrist. So, when you say you're loyal to your princess, you're talking about her, right? Jason peered at her like he couldn't figure out why he was wasting time with such an idiot. Cinder cleared her throat. Right. I should have let Sybil have you. He muttered, shaking his head. I thought maybe the princess would be proud if she heard about me turning against Sybil, that she would approve of my decision. But who am I kidding? She'll never even know. Do you love her? He glared at her, disgusted. Don't try to push your swoony psychodrama on me. I'm sworn to protect her. Can't do that very well from down here, can I? Protect her from what? Protect her from what? Levana? Among other things. Oh, fuck. Cinder collapsed onto one of the storage crates, feeling like she just sprinted halfway across the desert. Her body was drained, her brain frazzled. Jason didn't care about her at all. He was loyal to the Queen's stepdaughter. She hadn't even known the Queen's stepdaughter had people who were loyal to her. Help me, she said, not hiding the pleading in her tone as she met Jason's gaze. I swear to you, I can stop Levana. I can get you back to Luna, where you can protect your princess or do whatever you need to. But I need help. That much is pretty obvious. Are you going to let me in on this miracle plan of yours? She gulped. Maybe. Eventually. He shook his head, looking like he wanted to laugh as he gestured out toward the streets of Farafra. You're just desperate because the strongest ally you have right now is in a drug-induced coma. Wolf is going to be fine, Cinder said, with more conviction than she'd expected. Then she sighed. I'm desperate because I need as many allies as I can get. Princess Winter, huh? Fuck was she in the last 3 books? Well, I don't even know what to think. So Levana has a stepdaughter. Previous marriage, maybe? I don't know. But, or adoption? I don't know. Either way. Princess Winter. But then there's Princess Celine. Princess Celine has more of a right to the throne because she's the daughter of Queen Channery, who Levana had Channery and Celine, quote unquote, murdered, so she could take the throne as the next blood heir. And then she's like reestablishing her own line with Winter. So Jason is true to Winter. Cool. The fuck does this mean for our crew? How are the people of Luna going to react when Cinder says, I'm Princess Celine? So you know that princess that you've been loving this whole time? Yeah, bye. Yeah, fuck her. It's all about me now. Ooh. Ooh. Damn. Did they build that butcher's shop on 20-foot stilts in each corner? Because I'll tell you what, the stakes have been raised. That was terrible. We'll have to find out more. I don't fucking know what to think. Who's this Winter bitch? We're going to read about her in the next book, obviously, but let's assume I don't have that knowledge. Who's Princess Winter? Is Scarlet going to meet Princess Winter because she's on Luna? Is that going to be a fucking thing? That'd be cool. I hope Scarlet isn't made to be a slave to the fucking royal family. That'd be fucked up. But he said that Princess Winter would be happy that he rebelled against the Thaumaturge, which tells me that she has issues with how Luna's being run, which tells me maybe she has issues with Levana and maybe will become a possible ally? Maybe possibly help out Cinder? But would she want to help out to put herself on the throne? Just to remove Levana from the throne? Or to instill Cinder on the throne? I suppose we'll just have to find out more in the next video. Catch you guys next time. Bye!